All right, let's make a pattern for our mitten. So here's how you do it. It's real simple. There are more complicated patterns out there that maybe are better, but this one's super simple and really easy and free. So you're just gonna use your hand. If you're gonna make a glove that's about the right size for you, then you're gonna use your hand. You're gonna put it right down on the piece of cardboard. You wanna make sure your thumb is sticking out. No, don't have it up tight. You wanna have it sticking out because you need a space, for a place for that thumb. And you also want to have some space here for your wrist. You don't want to have your glove end right here because typically your sleeve doesn't go all the way down there. So you want a little bit of a cuff, something that's going to protect a little bit of heat up a little higher. So just an inch or two above where your wrist is there. That'll be just about right. I'm doing a mitten, so I'm going to keep my fingers together. I can show you how to draw one for glove. And then you just trace out. I take my thing here and I just trace everything out. And there we go. So that's it. Now the problem with this, I mean, this is great and all, but the problem here is that if you make a glove just like this, it'll be too small because you are gonna have to sew these together and you need something called seam allowance. And also your hand is not perfectly flat like a piece of paper. It's got thickness to it. And so you need some extra space in there. So what I do is I go out about an inch or so outside of that line. So I'm just gonna do this dotted line on the outside here. Like so. Oops, maybe that's not quite out enough. Does not have to be exact at all. Now, when we get down to the wrist part here by the thumb, notice how it scoops in a little bit, right? You don't want that because you have to put your hand into your glove. And this part of your hand is wider than your wrist. So you actually need some space, this much space, to be down here at the wrist. So what I tend to do is somewhere right along this cut line, I'm gonna now have it go straight down. So you'll notice there's more than an inch on this side, but that's because I do want my wrist parts, the cuff part, to be a little bit larger so I can get my hand in and out. Otherwise it's pretty tough. You can actually tear the seam there if you don't do that. Okay, now we're gonna cut out along this dotted line here, the dotted line. Notice that's a little tight in there, so I might cut a little bit further out. It's always better to have your gloves a little bit bigger than smaller. Okay, so here's our fabric that we're gonna use. And this is just for our trial run to see if this is gonna be the right size for us, make sure everything's working the way we want to. And this particular one already has a seam here. And so I'm just gonna leave it as is, and I'm gonna let that be the seam on this side, because I've got a pretty straight edge on this side. So that way I don't have to sew this, right? I just have to sew this part now. Okay, so this is a joined seam over on this side. I'm gonna keep that as is. I don't do any stitching there. And now, because this is that thicker cardboard, I can just mark right on my cloth where I want to cut. So that's my cut line now. Now, one thing is that if you think about where your thumb's going to be here, this is not going to be enough of a thumb. You actually need to cut this down about an inch or so, just to have it cut in a little bit. And that can be, if you want, it can be a little straighter this way. It doesn't really matter too much. That way, there's a little bit of freedom in this piece. I'll show you what I mean. Now, I have this, And now you see it is gonna give me, I'll do it over here. It's gonna give me some space for that thumb. So I actually have a little more working room for my thumb. And that's about it, all right? And we'll come back. In the next video, we're gonna sew this up. I'm just gonna sew along there and we're all done.